Hello and welcome to the Narrow Gauge Railway Museum at Wenecja in Poland. And this, I believe, is the largest open-air railway museum in Europe. It's based on the 600mm gauge, which I think is the second smallest. The smallest, I believe, being the 597mm gauge, which is at Festiniog in the UK. I believe. I could be wrong on that one. Now, this is the 30th of June, and it's been very hot. Today's not so hot, even though I am wearing a t-shirt, but as is often the case, the price for a bit of heat is afterwards a storm. And today we're in storm territory as a result. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you around and show you a bit of the museum. There are, of course, other people here, but there is not a great deal now I can actually do about that. Right, so let's have a look at, start off with this one here, because what we can see, narrow gauge, but it's got this interesting tender. Now, the tender itself means that the range of the train can be extended. So it's carrying its coal, and the coal will heat up the water to make the wheels go around. This one here, this carriage here, this is an unusual one, very unusual one, I'd say. I've never seen one like this in action. This is for carrying wood. So you've got the tree trunks would go on that and then be carried. Now, you've probably seen lorries carrying wood around, which sometimes they look somewhat similar. But for me, first time seeing one for a train. Now, I'm doing this obviously in English, but there is also, for those who speak Polish, which I don't suppose is all that many if you're watching this, but there's a far more detailed video in Polish for those that can understand the language, or those that want to just look at the video and not understand the language. Here on my right is a level crossing hut. And very quickly, these huts they had a number of comfort installations. And this was a job that was done by either a male or a female. So it would sit there. There's a telephone. Bear in mind when this was done. This is the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. You've got your clocks. You can keep in contact. You've got there's a heating, and you'll see the heating is a major part of this railway, and there's a radio. So as more or less as soon as this line was built, there was already radio contact between one and the other. That's huts controlling what was happening. Now here we've got this level crossing, and if you've got to this place, you will have seen that there are many railway level crossings to get here, because that is when there's tourist rides going out amongst in the countryside, using a large part of what the line formerly covered. Now, this train here, you've got the date on it, there you have it, 1949. So this line was still in use until the 1960s. So it would have probably got 20 years or so use out of it. The museum was set up in 1972, and I think for the time this is really very advanced. I mean, although one of the ministers in the government, the communist government at the time, was pro-railway museum, which is possibly how it was saved. Now, this is an example of a postal van. So the post office worker would sit in there stamping letters and what have you as they came in, get to a station, shout, "Is Mr. whatever Kowalski here?" and hand out the letters like that. Here we have something used for Well, it was for carrying milk, but as it drove along, it would be rattling and shaking around and all the rest of it, and so the milk would turn into butter, and so it would arrive at the destination with the butter already made. I now give you an idea of where we are. Now, narrow gauge railways were built normally for reasons of economy, or it could be that because they couldn't actually enter into other areas. Now here we have an idea of this is what's running today. I mean, obviously this railway line when built was longer, but you can see that what it's doing, it's going around the lakes. So that's the tourist route which is available today. Now, doing curves like this, it makes it much easier if it's narrow gauge. Now, narrow gauge, it can't move as fast as standard gauge, but it's much easier to make the railway lines. And if you sort of imagine had it been sort of standard gauge, then possibly, I don't know, I'm just sort of guessing it, but here it would have to come up something like that. So it takes up much less land. From an engineering point of view, it's much easier to build, but on the downside, the carrying capacity is much less. Now here, we get an idea of how the trains actually worked. So, what you get is this bit here, it's full of water, and to get to the pressure needed to get the train to actually work, it might have to stand for 8 hours heating up constantly, and once it got to that level of pressure, the train would be off. There are two sort of motors, I don't know if I'm using the right word here, but on either side we've got this here, and that would get the I don't know what the technical term is, but the bar to work that would then move the wheels around. Now, I might have studied linguistics at university, but trains wasn't part of it, so I don't know what the technical terms are. So if you're a train buff, you're going to be somewhat disappointed by my language. Okay, coming in here, a carriage and railway tickets. Now, these type of railway tickets, I can recall them being used in Poland in the 1980s. In fact, there was even a machine on the railway line, the local railway line in Gdynia, Gdansk and Sopot. And what you do, you put your 2 złote, as it was then, the old 2 złote, because the currency's now changed. Now it's just a fraction of a grosz there. But and then it would make this noise, and one of these tickets would jump out. But you can see from here that these tickets, this size, easily fit into a pocket or a lady's handbag or something like that. Coming through here, we can see that the trains, they have these, so people facing each other. And apparently this is to, well, maybe, it's to encourage people to talk so they can talk to each other. Of course, though, had they all been in the same direction, then I dare say they could have fitted more people in. Now, some of these trains here are on, or railway carriages are on permanent exposition. Others have actually been, are on loan. And they will be running as from tomorrow. Let's go in here. Now, we're still in COVID times, that's why these signs are up. And here we can see the metro, shall we say, I just made that word up myself, actually, but this is how the underground is in many countries. Maybe not in the UK, actually, but for example in so it is in Warsaw or Moscow, for example. Here we have a heater. Now, the railway companies didn't supply the fuel. If you were going on a longer journey, you brought your fuel with you. So I don't know if you brought a bag of coal or a few pieces of wood or whatever. You put them in there, and then that would keep the whole place warmish. Sometimes these heaters are really good, and at other times they're not much use at all. That's my experience of them. Yeah, I wonder if can I open this? Oh, I can. There we go. Ah, so that's what you see in the films from the Wild West. Okay, here once more. I think this is an older carriage, and oh, there we have. Now this is quite curious. This is the so this was part of Germany before the First World War, but this has been written for the locals of Polish speaking and the police. So this is the orders of the police. It's in Polish language. 28th of June 1894, and so it tells you what you can and what you can't do whilst you're on the train. Another heater. So this is for obviously goods, cattle or whatever, or things to have to be carried around. This van here is the pride of their collection. Now, if you know about trains, you might understand why. As I said before, trains aren't really my specialist subject. This narrow gauge engine was built in 1935. That we have at Les Ateliers Métallurgiques Nivelles Belgique, Division de Nivelles. So Nivelles must be the name of the company, and it's Les Ateliers Métallurgiques Nivelles is the subsidiary. And now this one here is in, I believe these are German colours actually, because in Poland they used black, in Belgium they used white, but the German colour was green and black for their trains. There's only two of these trains, one's in Brussels and the other one is right here. Now what they've got with this is they've got this long I don't know what they call it. Sorry, the long barrel, I suppose, where the water's contained. And by doing this design actually increased the speed. So most of them actually ran at around 25 kilometers an hour. This could do 35. Now you may be saying, well, yeah, but other trains even much earlier than that were doing over 150 kilometers an hour. Yes, that's true, but they were on standard gauge. They were built to go fast, not to go slow. And here we have some containers, these urns, which look somewhat like Greek or something like that, ancient Greek. These were I suspect that they were used for fluids. I suspect, I don't really know. Here we've got something which is used for wheat, for example, and this is a tipping wagon. So what would happen is this would tip to one side. I believe that the whole thing actually can tip to one side, and so if you've got wheat or something like that which is being taken from one place to another, that would just tip over and all the wheat would come out. So that would be much easier than having a couple of people there with spades. 4 years ago, I was at a place in Austria, the outdoor museum, Salzburg Outdoor Museum. They had two trains there. One of them, though, was from the Channel Tunnel. It wasn't historic. And the other one was relatively recent as well. These are all older things. Oh dear, I've forgotten. I think I didn't know the word for this. Anyway, a roundabout sort of thing. This, obviously, it moves, and each engine goes into the engine shed, and it's got its own particular engine shed to go to. The carriages, it would seem, stayed outside. So the engines got the engine set, and this would put them into their particular place. In Polish, that's an obrotnica, and in English, I've forgotten. So here we can see where they were made. Castle, 1915. Most of the wagons we see here were actually manufactured in Germany, Berlin, or Castle like that one. But as we saw earlier, there's Chrzanów in Poland, which was built a bit later. And here, there you go, 1963. But it says the word naprawcze, which means repair. So it was probably then repaired. It's much older, but it got that on it, so it was done up in Poznan in 1963. Because to be quite honest, that thing does look considerably older than I am, although it's in much better condition. And so there you've got 10 tons capacity, and so this is something I often talk about in my motorhome stuff, is payload. So you've got payload there of 10 tons, so it actually weighs though 4,950, which would be quite a lot for a empty motorhome, although not impossible. So, and that's a quick look around. But what we'll do now is we'll have a walk into the waiting room, which has also got some curious period features as well. Now, obviously, the best time to come here will be when the trains are actually running. And I think normally they run from April to October. As I said, this year and last year were major exceptions because of the situation with COVID. You can see my motorhome is actually in the outside, and they have a particular place for motorhomes to park in. Now, this building is new, but inside the waiting room, it's old, or at least the features are old. And so we'll go in there. Every railway station had a clock. And so what I found particularly interesting, these telephones, and were they for public use or not? I don't know the answer to that one. So there we have a map, which so it's from Poland. It's in the interwar period. But one thing you might be able to tell, but the railway network in the German areas, or former German areas, is much more dense than it was, for example, in the previously Russian areas. I think these chairs are from the 19th century. Oh, they've got this PKP, which is the Polish National Railways sign on them, which should have been put on actually later. Oh. Well, I like these old maps. Can't see a date on it though. And there's the ticket office, which now sells souvenirs. Oh, and there's the heater and a thing for air conditioning. The air conditioner isn't a period. Right, so that gives you an idea, quick overlook, and of this absolutely outstanding museum. I think we might just finish off with this gentleman here, who was a guide, and his he worked on the railway, but in his spare time he used to be a guide. And so there, 1906 to 1992, a legend of the Żnin narrow gauge railway. Leon Lichochinski. So, and he was noted for his ears, which stuck out. I mean, Prince Charles used to have ears that stuck out a lot. I can remember that as a child, but I think he's had them stuck in again. So, thanks very much for watching. Hope you found that interesting. And I have a lot of material from Poland. Maybe it's not so much on railways, but that'll give you a vague idea of what's to be seen here. And if there's enough interest, I can do more on railways. Thanks for watching.